Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This week, we're going deep on something that might keep you up at night. Industrial cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Think about all those systems that keep our world running. Power grids, factories, water treatment plants.
Yeah.
Now imagine a bunch of security flaws popping up in those systems.
Oh.
Not a pretty picture.
Not at all.
We've got Rhino Cybersecurity's latest report on the top ICS vulnerabilities discovered just last week.
Okay.
November 19th to the 25th, to be exact.
Right.
And we're not talking about small potatoes here.
Oh.
Some major names are affected. Schneider Electric, SCADA.
Wow.
Companies that are integral to our critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
To help us unpack this and understand what these vulnerabilities really mean, I've got an expert here with me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great.
I think this report really underscores the importance of staying vigilant when it comes to industrial cybersecurity. What we often forget is just how interconnected these systems are. A vulnerability in one system could have a domino effect across entire sectors.
Yeah, scary stuff.
Yeah.
So let's dive into some of the specifics here.
Okay.
One vulnerability that really caught my eye is CVE 2024-10575. This one affects Schneider Electric's EcoStruxure IT gateway.
Okay.
And it's rated as high severity.
Right.
What's alarming is that someone could potentially gain access to critical systems just by knowing the system's IP address.
Oh, wow.
I mean, how is that even possible?
What makes this vulnerability particularly concerning is its potential for widespread exploitation.
Okay.
Knowing the IP address of a vulnerable system is often enough for an attacker to launch an attack. We're talking about the potential for unauthorized access, data breaches, and even operational disruptions in sectors like energy management and industrial automation.
So it's not just about stealing data.
Yeah.
It's about potentially messing with the actual operations of these critical systems.
Exactly.
It's unsettling, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And this isn't an isolated incident.
Right.
The report highlights another critical vulnerability.
Okay.
CVE 2024-47407, which impacts SCADA's PO Manager runtime.
Okay.
This one enables something called operating system command injection.
Right.
And what makes this particularly dangerous is that it allows an attacker to execute commands remotely on the targeted system.
Yes.
Potentially taking control of critical processes. Hold on, command injection.
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of a hacker movie.
I know, right?
But we're talking about real-world systems here, right?
Yes.
This isn't just theoretical.
Oh, unfortunately, no. These vulnerabilities are very real.
Right.
And they highlight the increasing sophistication of attacks targeting industrial control systems. And when we're talking about SCADA and HMI systems, which are the very systems that allow us to monitor and control these industrial processes, the potential impact of a successful attack is massive.
Okay, so we've got some seriously scary vulnerabilities here.
Yeah.
And they're not just theoretical threats.
No.
This report highlights that manufacturing is the most affected sector this week,
Interesting.
with 50% of the vulnerabilities impacting it directly.
Okay.
But I'm curious, is this a trend or is it just a coincidence?
What's interesting here is that while manufacturing is taking the brunt of it this week, the energy and communication sectors are not far behind.
Oh.
This points to a larger trend of convergence in critical infrastructure. Our power grids, communication networks, and manufacturing facilities are becoming increasingly reliant on each other, making the potential for cascading failures all the more concerning.
So a vulnerability in one sector could actually trigger a chain reaction across multiple sectors.
Precisely.
Wow.
That's why these vulnerabilities, while seemingly isolated, represent a much larger systemic risk.
All right, so we've talked about the vulnerabilities, but let's get down to brass tacks here.
Okay.
This report singles out Schneider Electric as being hit the hardest, with 50% of this week's vulnerabilities affecting their systems.
Right.
And we're not talking about some obscure systems here.
Yeah.
We're talking about energy management and industrial automation systems, the stuff that keeps the lights on and the factories humming.
Schneider Electric's widespread presence in critical infrastructure makes this a major concern.
Right.
Their systems are used across a wide range of industries, from power generation and distribution to water treatment and manufacturing. This really underscores the need for robust security practices, not just for end users, but also for vendors who supply these critical technologies.
So the responsibility doesn't just fall on the companies using these systems, but also on the companies that are building them.
Yeah.
It's a shared responsibility.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Security needs to be baked into the design and development of these systems from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be added on as an afterthought.
The report also mentions SCADA, a company that specializes in SCADA and HMI systems, as being responsible for about a third of the vulnerabilities this week.
Right.
What makes their vulnerabilities particularly worrisome?
SCADA's vulnerabilities, particularly those related to command injection and path traversal, are concerning because of the level of access they can provide an attacker. Path traversal vulnerabilities, for instance, could allow an attacker to navigate through a system's directories and potentially access sensitive files or configurations that they shouldn't be able to reach. This could lead to data breaches, system manipulation, or even operational disruptions.
So it's not just about shutting down a system.
No.
It's about potentially manipulating it from the inside.
That's the scary part.
Oh, boy.
An attacker could subtly alter processes, corrupt data, or even introduce malware, all while remaining undetected.
Okay, this is a lot to digest.
Yeah.
We've got some pretty serious vulnerabilities here. That could potentially impact critical infrastructure in a major way.
Right.
But the report does offer some recommendations for mitigating these risks.
Okay.
And I'm hoping you can help us break them down.
Sure.
Because honestly, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
I understand.
Where do we even begin?
You're right.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming. But it's important to remember that there are steps we can take to address these challenges.
Okay, good.
The first recommendation is something we hear a lot, but it's crucial. Stay informed.
Stay informed.
Yeah.
Easy enough, right?
Right.
But what does that really mean in this context?
Well, does it mean I need to become a cybersecurity expert overnight? Well, you don't need to become an expert overnight.
Okay.
But you do need to stay up to date on the latest threats and vulnerabilities. Subscribe to security advisories from vendors like Schneider Electric and SCADA.
Right.
And keep an eye on alerts from agencies like CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
So basically, don't just bury our heads in the sand and hope these problems go away.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And in the world of cybersecurity, staying informed is your first line of defense.
Got it. So stay informed. Check. What's next on the list?
The next recommendation is a big one.
Okay.
And it's becoming increasingly popular.
Yeah.
Implementing zero trust architecture.
Okay, zero trust.
Yeah.
Now that sounds intense.
I know, a lot of people say that.
Break that down for me.
Okay.
What does that really entail?
Well, is it as drastic as it sounds? Zero trust is a security framework built on a simple principle. Never trust, always verify.
Okay.
In traditional security models,
Yeah.
we often assume that anything inside our network is trustworthy.
Right.
Zero trust flips that on its head.
Okay.
Instead of assuming trust, we verify every user, device, and connection attempting to access our systems.
So even if you're already inside the network, you're still treated as a potential threat.
Yes.
That seems like a pretty radical shift.
It is a shift.
Yeah.
But it's necessary in today's threat landscape where attacks can come from anywhere.
Right.
Including from within our own organizations.
Okay, so that's zero trust.
Yes.
What else have we got on the list?
Another important recommendation is network segmentation.
Okay.
It might sound complicated, but the concept is actually quite simple.
Okay, lay it on me.
Okay.
What is network segmentation?
So, and why is it so important? Imagine a factory with different departments or production lines.
Okay.
Network segmentation is like creating separate, secure zones within your network.
Right.
If one zone is compromised, it doesn't mean the entire network is compromised.
So it's about containing a potential breach.
Exactly.
Like closing off a section of the factory to prevent a fire from spreading.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
By isolating critical systems from each other. We can limit the damage an attacker can inflict, even if they manage to get into one part of the network.
Right.
They can't easily move laterally to other, more sensitive areas.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've got staying informed, zero trust, and network segmentation.
Right.
What else do we need to be thinking about?
Well, the next one is perhaps the most tedious, but also one of the most essential. Patch management.
Oh, patches?
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
Right.
But seriously, why are patches so important?
Patches are essentially software updates that fix known vulnerabilities. Think of them like fixing a crack in your foundation before it becomes a major structural problem. The problem is that managing patches, especially in complex industrial environments, can be a real headache.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
There are always so many patches.
Right.
And it's easy to fall behind.
Exactly.
So what's the key to effective patch management?
The key is to have a system in place to identify, assess, test, and deploy patches in a timely manner. It's not just about installing every patch that comes along, but about prioritizing the ones that address the most critical vulnerabilities for your specific systems.
So it's about being strategic.
Exactly.
Not just reactive.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting the picture here.
Good.
What else do we need to be mindful of?
Regular security assessments are crucial.
Okay.
This is like getting a regular health checkup for your network.
So we're talking about bringing in these cybersecurity doctors to give our systems a thorough examination.
Exactly.
But what does that look like in practice?
Security assessments involve a variety of techniques, like vulnerability scans, penetration tests, and audits. These assessments help identify weaknesses in your systems and processes before an attacker can exploit them.
Okay.
It's about being proactive, not just waiting for something bad to happen and then trying to fix it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like preventive medicine.
Exactly. For our networks.
Right. Okay, what's next?
The next recommendation is all about access security.
Okay.
Who has access to what?
Right.
And how we can strengthen those controls.
Okay, so access security.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty self-explanatory.
It is.
But are there any specific strategies or best practices we should be aware of?
Absolutely.
Okay.
One key aspect is implementing role-based access control, which means that individuals are only granted access to the systems and information.
Right.
They need to perform their specific job functions.
Okay.
Another crucial element is enforcing strong authentication methods.
Right.
Like multi-factor
Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit of a hassle?
I know. Some people think that.
I mean, having to enter a code from your phone every time you log in.
Right.
Is it really necessary?
It might seem like an extra step, but trust me, it's worth it.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Yeah.
Even if someone manages to steal your password, they still can't get into your account without that second factor, which could be a code from your phone, a fingerprint scan, or a security token. It adds an extra layer of protection that can make a world of difference.
So even if the bad guys get their hands on one piece of the puzzle, they're still locked out.
Exactly.
I like that. Multi-factor authentication's on the to-do list.
Right.
What else do we need to do to beef up our security?
The next recommendation is one that we often don't want to think about.
Okay.
But it's critical developing incident response plans.
Okay, incident response plans.
Yeah.
This sounds like something we hope we never have to use.
Exactly.
But need to have just in case.
Absolutely.
So what does a good incident response plan look like?
Well, is it just a matter of calling the IT department and hoping for the best? A good incident response plan is much more than just calling for help.
Okay.
It's a detailed playbook for what to do in case of a cyber attack. It outlines who is responsible for what, how to communicate during an incident, and the steps to take to contain and remediate the attack.
So it's like a fire drill.
Yeah.
But for cyber attacks,
we
need to know exactly what to do.
Exactly.
Who to contact,
yes,
and how to minimize the damage.
That's right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect, even when it comes to cyber attacks.
Absolutely.
What's the last recommendation on the list?
The final recommendation is one that we often take for granted, but can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Employee training.
Employee training.
Yeah.
It's like the old saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Exactly.
But why is employee training so important in the context of industrial cybersecurity?
Humans are often the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain.
Okay.
Attackers frequently exploit human vulnerabilities through phishing scams, social engineering, and other tactics. Educating staff to recognize these threats, understand security policies, and practice good cyber hygiene is one of the most effective ways to prevent incidents in the first place.
So even if we have all the fancy security technology in place, it can all be undone by one employee clicking on a malicious link in an email.
Unfortunately, that's often the case.
Oh, wow.
That's why cybersecurity awareness training is so important.
Okay.
It's about empowering employees to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Okay. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Good.
It's not just about technology.
No.
It's about people,
Mm-hmm.
processes,
Yeah,
and a culture of security.
absolutely.
It sounds like there's a lot to consider,
There is.
and it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it's clear that we can't afford to ignore these issues.
Absolutely.
Right.
Industrial cybersecurity is no longer just an IT issue.
Right.
It's a business issue,
Right.
a societal issue,
Yeah.
and ultimately a matter of public safety.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
And I have to admit, it's a lot to process.
Yeah.
But I think the key takeaway is that ICS vulnerabilities are serious business.
Absolutely.
They affect all of us, whether we realize it or not.
That's right.
And we need to be proactive about cybersecurity,
Mm-hmm.
both as individuals and as organizations.
Absolutely.
But it's not just about doom and gloom, right?
Right.
There are things we can do to mitigate these risks.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we're going to dive deeper into those mitigation strategies and best practices in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, great.
We'll be exploring the human element of industrial cybersecurity,
Okay.
looking at how human error and malicious insiders can exploit these vulnerabilities.
Oh, that sounds fascinating and a little terrifying at the same time.
It is.
I can't wait to hear more about it.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to take a short break.
Okay.
Join us back here for part 2, where we'll continue our deep dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity.
I'll be here. Welcome back. As we just discussed, the threat landscape in industrial cybersecurity is constantly evolving and becoming increasingly complex. While technological vulnerabilities are a significant concern, it's crucial to remember that human actions play a critical role in either amplifying or mitigating those vulnerabilities.
You're right. We talked a lot about the technical stuff in the first part, but you hinted that human error can be a huge factor in these cyber incidents. I'm ready to dive into that.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here specifically? Is it just a matter of employees making silly mistakes, or is there more to it?
It's definitely more nuanced than just silly mistakes. While accidental errors do happen, we also need to consider the potential for intentional malicious actions from insiders.
Okay.
Think about phishing scams where someone clicks a bad link, social engineering tactics where someone is tricked into giving up sensitive information, or even disgruntled employees deliberately sabotaging systems.
Okay, that's pretty unsettling. I guess we tend to focus on the external threats, those mysterious hackers in dark rooms. But you're saying the threat could be lurking right under our noses,
Yeah.
within our own organizations.
Exactly. And that's why cybersecurity awareness training is so crucial. We need to equip employees with the knowledge and skills to recognize these threats, to understand the potential consequences of their actions, and to practice good cyber hygiene. But it's not just about training, it's about fostering a culture of security within organizations where everyone feels a sense of responsibility for protecting critical assets.
So it's about changing the mindset, not just checking a box on a training form.
Precisely. Security needs to be embedded in the DNA of the organization. It needs to become second nature. And that starts with leadership setting the tone and making it clear that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility.
You mentioned something earlier about incident response plans. It sounds like having a solid plan in place could be crucial for dealing with the fallout from both accidental errors and malicious actions. Can you expand on that a bit? What should a robust incident response plan include, especially when the human element is involved?
A good incident response plan should address all potential scenarios, including those involving human error or malicious intent. It's about having a clear step-by-step process for identifying the scope of a breach, containing the damage, eradicating the threat, recovering affected systems, and learning from the incident to prevent future attacks.
So it's like having a fire drill, but for cyber attacks. We need to practice our response so that when the alarm bells go off, we know exactly what to do and who to contact.
Exactly. And when it comes to incidents involving the human element, the response plan should include protocols for investigating potential insider threats, preserving evidence, and working with law enforcement if necessary.
This is starting to paint a pretty complex picture. It sounds like we need a whole team of experts just to manage the human side of cybersecurity.
Well, it doesn't have to be that overwhelming. The key is to start with a solid foundation. That means establishing clear security policies, implementing appropriate technical controls like access controls and monitoring systems, and providing regular training for all employees.
So it's a combination of technology, policies, and people. No one element can do it all. It has to be a holistic approach.
You got it. And let's not forget the importance of communication. Creating open channels of communication where employees feel comfortable reporting suspicious activity or potential security breaches is absolutely crucial. It's about building trust and encouraging a culture where people feel empowered to speak up.
You've mentioned a few times now that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. I think that's a really important point to drive home. I think there's a tendency for people to think, well, I'm not a tech person, so this doesn't really apply to me. But you're saying that's not true.
Absolutely not. Cybersecurity is not just an IT issue. It's a business issue. It's a societal issue, and it ultimately affects everyone. Think about it. The systems we're talking about, these industrial control systems, they're the backbone of our modern society. They power our homes, our businesses, our transportation systems, our healthcare facilities. If those systems are compromised, it doesn't just affect a handful of tech people, it affects all of us.
So it's not just about data breaches or financial losses anymore. It's about our basic needs, our safety, our ability to function as a society.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to raise awareness about industrial cybersecurity and to make it clear that everyone has a role to play in protecting these critical systems.
Okay, so we've established that this is a big deal and that everyone needs to be aware of the risks.
Yeah.
But what can ordinary people do? We're not all cybersecurity experts. We can't all write code or build firewalls.
Yeah.
What practical steps can we take to make a difference?
Well, for starters, simply staying informed is a huge step. Read about cybersecurity issues, follow reputable sources of information, and educate yourself about the threats. It doesn't require a computer science degree to understand the basics.
So knowledge is power, as they say. What else can we do?
Be mindful of your online behavior. Be cautious about what you click on and download. Use strong passwords and enable multi-factor authentication whenever possible. And if you work in an organization that uses industrial control systems, advocate for strong security practices. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that seems amiss.
So even if we're not the ones writing the code or configuring the firewalls, we can still be active participants in cybersecurity.
We can be the eyes and ears on the ground reporting suspicious activity and raising awareness.
Exactly. Cybersecurity is a team sport, and we all have a role to play. Well said. Now, before we move on, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the potential for malicious insiders. The report itself doesn't delve too deep into specific examples of how this could play out. Can you give us a hypothetical scenario to illustrate the point?
Sure. Imagine a disgruntled employee at a manufacturing plant who has access to the control systems for the production line. Let's say they're upset about a recent performance review, or maybe they're facing disciplinary action. If they were to intentionally manipulate those controls, they could cause significant damage to equipment, disrupt production, or even create a safety hazard for other workers. And depending on the nature of the facility, the consequences could extend far beyond the plant itself.
That's a chilling thought. It really highlights the need for robust access controls and monitoring systems to detect and prevent that kind of malicious activity. But it also underscores the importance of addressing employee grievances and fostering a positive work environment where people feel valued and respected.
Absolutely. It's about creating a culture where people feel comfortable raising concerns through proper channels rather than resorting to sabotage or other harmful actions.
So it's a complex interplay of technology, human behavior, and organizational culture. It's not just about building walls and installing alarms. It's about understanding the human element and addressing the root causes of potential threats.
You've hit the nail on the head. Industrial cybersecurity is a multifaceted challenge, and we need to approach it from multiple angles.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've talked about the human element of cybersecurity, the potential for accidental errors and malicious actions, and the steps we can take to mitigate those risks. But I'm sensing there's still more to this story. What other trends and challenges should we be aware of as we look ahead? I'm ready to explore what the future holds in the realm of industrial cybersecurity.
You're right. There's a whole other layer to this. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of the emerging trends and challenges that are shaping the future of industrial cybersecurity and what you should be prepared for.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into industrial cybersecurity. And honestly, my head is spinning a little bit.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
We've talked about vulnerabilities, scary scenarios, and the human element.
Right?
But I have a feeling there's even more to uncover.
There is.
What's lurking on the horizon in the world of industrial cybersecurity? What new challenges are brewing, and what should we be bracing ourselves for?
Well, you're right to be a little apprehensive because the landscape is constantly shifting.
Okay.
One trend that's really catching my eye is the blurring of lines between IT and OT systems.
Okay.
Traditionally, these were separate worlds,
Right.
but now we're seeing more and more integration.
Yeah.
And that creates a whole new set of challenges.
Wait, so you're saying the line between the IT world, the computers and networks we use every day, and the OT world, those industrial control systems that run our critical infrastructure, that line is becoming less clear.
Exactly.
I'm not sure I understand the implications of that. Could you unpack that a bit more for me?
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Before, attackers might have targeted IT systems to steal data or disrupt business operations.
Right.
Relatively low stakes in the grand scheme of things.
Mhm.
But as these systems converge, attackers can potentially target OT systems to cause physical damage, disrupt essential services like power or water, or even harm people.
Oh, wow.
The stakes are getting significantly higher.
Okay, now that's what I call a scary scenario.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about stolen credit card numbers anymore.
No.
We're talking about potentially life-threatening situations.
Right.
That's a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. And that's why this convergence of IT and OT is such a game changer for industrial cybersecurity. We need to start thinking about security in a much more holistic way. It's no longer just about protecting data, it's about protecting people and critical infrastructure.
So it's not just about building higher walls around our systems.
Right.
It's about rethinking the entire architecture of our digital world to make it more resilient and less vulnerable to these kinds of attacks.
Exactly.
That's a daunting task.
It is daunting, but it's also an exciting opportunity to rethink the way we approach security. And there are a lot of smart people working on this problem.
Okay, so that's one trend to watch, the blurring of lines between IT and OT. What else is on your radar? What other challenges are looming on the horizon?
Well, one that's already making waves is the rise of the Industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT.
Okay.
We're seeing more and more devices connected to industrial networks. Sensors, actuators, controllers, all talking to each other and generating mountains of data.
Right.
But many of these devices are not designed with security in mind, which makes them prime targets for attackers.
So it's not just about the big complex systems anymore. It's also about all these smaller interconnected devices that could be exploited to gain access to the larger network.
Exactly.
Kind of like a backdoor into our critical infrastructure.
That's a good analogy. And the sheer number of these devices is staggering. It's like trying to secure millions of tiny little entry points all at once. It's a nightmare scenario for security professionals.
And I imagine the attackers are getting smarter and more sophisticated as well. Aren't they always one step ahead?
Unfortunately, they often are. We're seeing a rise in the use of AI and machine learning by attackers,
Oh, wow.
which allows them to automate attacks, identify vulnerabilities more quickly, and evade traditional security measures.
So it's a constant cat and mouse game.
It is.
As we develop better defenses, the attackers are getting better at finding ways to circumvent them.
Exactly.
It sounds like we're fighting an uphill battle.
It can feel that way sometimes, but that's why it's so important to be proactive, to stay ahead of the curve, to constantly assess our vulnerabilities, and to be prepared for the unexpected.
Okay, so we've got a lot on our plate. Converging IT and OT systems, the explosion of the IIoT, and increasingly sophisticated attackers. It's enough to make you want to throw your hands up in despair.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But there must be something we can do. What are the experts saying? What are the solutions to these complex challenges?
Well, one thing is clear. We can't just rely on traditional security approaches anymore. We need to be thinking outside the box, adopting new technologies and strategies, and embracing a more collaborative approach to cybersecurity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some specifics. What are some of these new approaches that we should be looking at?
One that's gaining a lot of traction is the concept of security by design,
Okay.
which means building security into systems from the very beginning rather than trying to bolt it on as an afterthought. It's about thinking about security at every stage of the product development lifecycle.
So instead of treating security as a separate add-on, we need to integrate it into the very fabric of our technology.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Another promising area is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning for defense.
Okay.
Just as attackers are using these technologies to their advantage, we can use them to detect and respond to threats more quickly and effectively.
So it's like fighting fire with fire, using the same tools that the attackers are using, but for good instead of evil.
Exactly. And there are a lot of exciting developments in this area. We're seeing the emergence of AI-powered security platforms that can analyze vast amounts of data, identify patterns and anomalies, and even predict attacks before they happen.
That sounds pretty futuristic, like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right?
But it's happening right now.
It is, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're also seeing advancements in areas like quantum computing, blockchain technology, and biometrics, all of which have the potential to revolutionize the way we approach cybersecurity.
Wow, it sounds like the future of industrial cybersecurity is going to be a wild ride full of challenges and opportunities.
It is.
But I have to ask, what about the human element? How do we ensure that people are part of the solution and not the weakest link?
That's a crucial question, and it all comes back to education and awareness. We need to empower everyone, from the CEO to the frontline worker, with the knowledge and skills they need to make smart security decisions.
So it's about creating a culture of cybersecurity awareness, where everyone understands their role in protecting critical infrastructure and feels empowered to speak up if they see something suspicious.
Precisely. And it's not just about technical training, it's about fostering a mindset of vigilance and responsibility, where everyone understands the potential consequences of a cyber attack and takes proactive steps to mitigate those risks.
Well, I have to say, this has been an eye-opening deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical details of vulnerabilities to the human element of cybersecurity to the emerging trends and challenges that are shaping the future of this field.
It's a lot to take in.
And it's clear that this is an issue that affects all of us, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember? What's the most important message you want to leave them with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination.
That's a good way to put it.
It's an ongoing process of assessment, adaptation, and improvement. There's no silver bullet, no one-size-fits-all solution. But by staying informed, embracing new technologies, and fostering a culture of security awareness, we can make our critical infrastructure more resilient and protect our world from the growing threat of cyber attacks.
Well said. That's a powerful message and one that we all need to take to heart. So to our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and maybe even a little bit inspiring, because the future of our digital world depends on all of us working together to make it safer and more secure.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.